Hi, this is Rúna, and you're listening to the Changemakers podcast, where we share tips, insight, tools, and stories from other changemakers designed to motivate you to become the change you want to see in your world. Make sure you join our Changemakers community at runamagnus.com/podcast. And now, this is your time to sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to introduce to you our guest today, Dr. David Paul. He is an executive advisor to C-level leaders in mindfulness, transformational change and leadership, and director of Advice in Australia. Advice stands for, and listen to this, Advisor to the Wise in Search of Excellence. Dr. David Paul is a member of our Global Advisory Board and is a huge part of the No More Boxes movement. This conversation is deep. This conversation is different. Yeah, you're going to walk away with something totally new after listening to Dr. David Paul share his wisdom around leadership, what needs to be done, and what are the little things that we all can start to do to become the change that we want to see in our world. Oh, David, I am so glad that you decided that I basically get you to become a guest on the Changemakers podcast. I'm just so glad, I'm so honored, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. Your life's work has more or less been about leadership. And if this world does not need every single one of us to tap into our leadership, the leader within, then I don't know when. So welcome.
Thank you, Rúna. Thank you very much. And it's a great honor to be here as well, because Changemakers, to me, is about making changes in places where there are challenges. But also, Changemakers, to me, is all about changing people's mindset. And at the end of the day, that's where it all begins.
It is, doesn't it? It really is. I was attending a conference the other day, and the conversation was around gender stereotypes. And the participants were they were in small groups, and they were supposed to go into talking about what is the stereotype of a man, what is a stereotype of a woman. Very interesting. And this was an international group. And for several times, I stopped the process and said, are we looking for the stereotype? Are you all into that? And the stereotype is something that is in you, and you have created that stereotype. Or are we taking in something that might have been a stereotype way back when, and we want to call that into existence? People did not understand me when I asked this question on many times. So it was really funny, and it was really interesting, because I just thought to myself, working in this whole thing about stereotyping, I thought, okay, I'm going to call into this existence the stereotype of a man that I see the man around me be. So I started to say, yeah, he's loving, he's caring, he's sexy, he cooks and cleans. And I could see the women around me going, men are not loving. And I could just feel that anger. And I thought, every single time we talk about these stereotypes, we are calling them into existence. What is your view on that? Because I know you are a genius in neuroscience and gender-based leadership and all that. What is your view on that?
You asked a very difficult question.
I know. And no prepare. I didn't even give you any chance to prepare. Did I?
But the question was daring, because you exposed people to really a duality. It's this or this. It's right or wrong. It's black or white. And what you were asking, though, is a whole range of fluid kind of scale. You know, it's not a scale of 1 to 10. It's 1 to 10 in different dimensions.
Yeah.
So, and therefore, you actually put everybody on the spot. The anger stems from that you're asking them to go beyond what they've been taught. So if I put them in the modern organization where they were under 35, which is one of the organizations that I deal with, and you talk about gender fluidity, one day, you know, a person comes in as Agnes, beautiful dress, clothing, the way they look, and a stranger coming into that place would meet Agnes. But the next day it's Andrew.
Yeah.
The same person. And if you called Andrew Agnes, you'd be in big trouble because there is no way Andrew would look like Agnes.
Yeah.
So who is who? Like, is it male? Is it female? Is it, you know, genderless, if you like, depending on which day it is? So the question that you ask is about, we need to help people make the bridge between where we are and where we need to be. Not because of gender, because we're human beings. So it's like I'm asking you to pick a coin, and I'm saying you can only have one side of the coin. Well, you can't. If I'm asking you to drink a glass of water, but please don't consume the water, what have you got?
Yeah, that's a quick one.
So it's, you know, it's like, I love swimming, but I hate the water. I love painting, but I hate painting walls. So it's this idea of, we need to be courageous enough to say the gender exists only for a biological reason, but not for all the other reasons that we need gender for, which is leadership, culture, communication, connection. And the word communication really means, at the end of the day, if you look at the crux of it, is to build a relationship. It doesn't matter with who, but it's a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's not about information. So I need you to complete me, because I only think in one way. I think only in one dimension as a male. I need you to complete what I have, and the same way. To make a whole, it does take many parts, not just one. But unfortunately, and I'm going to say this on behalf of all men, I apologize, but we have egos. And as I always say, in a room full of egos, everybody goes out stupid. EGOS. So
everybody,
for me,
yeah.
So we have to allow ourselves to sit with the fact that we live in a century. To survive this century, we can't have gender wars, gender issues to solve poverty, climate change, and many of the other things that we're facing today. We have to work together. And I always jokingly say to all the conferences that I address, the CEOs and executives that I address, I always say it'd be fun to have women in charge for 200 years, given that men have been around in charge for 2,000 years. What would happen? Will we spend that much in defense? Would the US spend $1 trillion+ in defense, for example? Would we turn a blind eye to the suffering of people? So I like the idea of what you said. Let me describe a man that I know. Cleans the house, cooks, washes, shows love, compassion,
Mm.
cares.
Yeah.
That to me is a wonderful human being. Whereas if we go back to the 1800s, well, yes, those are things that women were stereotypic in what they did, but no longer. I mean, it's almost like saying, well, women can't drive because they weren't allowed to ride horses back then.
Yeah. So by not being aware of how we're calling things into existence, and we're calling things into that might have been the fact in the 1800s, but we're calling it in without even thinking about
Yeah.
it. And I just thought about, so not only this, I saw a friend of ours from the network of transformational leaders, Harriet. She tagged me on Twitter conversations around Primark, the corporation, and their children's clothing from birth onwards. And the messaging that if you're a girl, being sweetie, being this, being that, and if you're a boy, you're a monster, and so you see, this is way before we're even born. And then I hear in this whole thing that the whole thing about when we talk about the normal boxes movement, and which is, you're one of our dearest advisor in that movement. I hear so often people say it's impossible to change this. And the funny thing is, every time I hear people say that it's impossible, it actually makes me think you just haven't seen it yet. And
I also
yeah,
think of Audrey Hepburn, the movie star.
yes.
Every time she said impossible, she says, I am possible.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say, it's only impossible because I have not been challenged to think beyond the impossibility.
Yeah.
So think of impossibility as a ring around your brain. The moment I break that ring, you're free to think. It's like letting a bird out of a cage. It can only think about the impossibility of flying because it's in a cage. Mm-hmm. But imagine if somebody opened that door, showed that bird, that brain, another way to live. And then that impossibility suddenly becomes a possibility. And any caged bird has problems flying for the first few times it tries, but eventually it will get there. It will get there. Yeah. And I that's why I think it's so critical for us to expose others to realize that we don't live in a dualistic world. In other words, that good and bad, right and wrong is not solving problems. It doesn't solve problems. So we need to approach the world not approaching a T intersection, but approach any problem with, like 8 possibilities, 10 possibilities. Kind of a ring road that opens up all sorts of direction.
Yeah, exactly.
But remember, the other side of the debate of that we're talking about is this, and that is for over probably 5,000 years, our brain has been conditioned to think only in dualistic terms. So we're sitting on the brink of something extraordinary. I mean, you as a leader of this whole space, you're sitting, we're all looking at you, and you are leading us to thinking beyond this very, very dualistic way of thinking. And it's hard to leave. The brain finds it hard to leave a dualistic world. It always loves to say black and white. But you're exposing us to not just shades of grey, but you're exposing us to a whole spectrum of colours between black and white. So to me, this is an exciting time to talk about these things, not with fear, but with boldness and courage, so that fear disappears as soon as we shine the light.
Yeah. And that bird in that cage is really, I can see that metaphor for humankind when we realize that we actually can go out of that cave and that it is our mindset.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And if
So,
I was being bold and courageous,
yeah,
we also need to challenge the male brain, which has been, again, conditioned. It's been trained. It's been
yeah,
taught. It's been educated to love its ego,
mhm,
to love control, and to exercise greed. So imagine if we gave up those three things,
mm.
and what would happen then?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What would happen then? And here's what is coming my way when you're saying this, because it feels to me that I know so many men today that I would not say, I would actually say they absolutely don't have a threat of that in their existence. They have their container is male, but there isn't this the ego, the greed, the control. It just simply isn't there. And then I know so many beautiful women who have all of that and some more. So,
Beautiful.
and I'm coming to that conclusion that by using these words that say something is feminine and something is masculine, that it creates some division. It's like you really have to be thinking about this and you really have been studying this to see that this is just different characteristics and this is just different skills, even if or attributes that regardless of your gender you have, and some of them you can actually grow and you can change. Like I can see that when I'm doing with my coaching clients, it increases their empathy, it increases their emotional intelligence, and they see and they face the ego. And the ego isn't always bad. The ego is there. I have plenty of ego. So I'm thinking, do you think that we can change this conversation into a space where it doesn't it doesn't become anything about which gender it is. It does come about what are the attributes, what are the skills, who are you to the core, and we can judge then another person as a human being. Do you think this will we get there, David?
Absolutely, Rena, because if you think about it, there are organizations that have women on boards and they work together to solve problems. And we also know organizations that have mainly, or they're all men,
Mm-hmm.
all male,
Mm-hmm.
and they have major problems in their organization.
Yeah.
But the biggest challenge, I think, is helping people to realize that it's okay to embrace the one of our humaneness rather than
Yeah.
the two of what makes us human.
Yeah.
And I always kind of laugh to myself. Imagine if we had another two genders on the planet besides male female.
Yeah.
How would we live?
Mm-hmm.
Would we all
Exactly.
four of us fight all the time? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, or would we learn to cooperate?
Yeah, and we see people that don't want to even belong to either.
Right.
Yeah, we
Excellent.
see that
Yes.
we see that today already, and we see rise of people finding it very difficult of finding that they are either, and so they go through surgery and they go through
Right. Right. Yeah.
tremendous
Excellent. Yeah.
amount of
Yeah.
and even once they've been converted to the other gender, they say, "Hey, that wasn't the thing."
Right.
So there's a lot of room in this space for
Yeah.
sure.
And look how we deal with them.
Yeah,
Look how we treat them. Look at our language around them. Look at the jokes around them.
yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah,
it is actually quite sad, but
yeah. It
at
is.
the end of the day, I think it is about challenging people's mindset to say, okay, and what if, and what about? And the more advanced question to ask is, and how about?
Mm,
Because we're trying to get people to realize that, together we achieve more. As
yeah,
individuals, we achieve far less.
yeah.
And that is what is going to save our species. Because the more isolated we are, the more destructive we get.
Hmm. Hmm. One of the questions that I hear so often when with women empowerment groups is the question: how are we going to get our male colleagues to the conversations, into the conversation, to the on the table of talking about the consequences and go into this field of, hey, how do we work better together as a human being, not as a woman and a man, but as human being? What are your thoughts on that?
In fact, I think we should focus all our conversations on that.
Yeah.
And the simple reason is that we need to get the brain away from coming back to those dualistic ways of
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
We need to actually say, leave that aside for a moment. How do we solve this problem together?
Yeah.
How do we make this happen together?
Mm-hmm.
Because every time we go back to opening that box again, then we then get into this, yeah, but you're a woman and you're a man and you're
Yeah.
emotional and you've got no emotions and all that kind
Yeah.
of thinking, that dualistic thinking. But on the other hand, my excitement is, rather than saying, what can we do to make them see this? I
Mm-hmm.
think what we should say is, how can we get them to help us solve this?
Oh,
Don't
how can we get
get them to help us
men
solve
to
this. Yeah,
help us solve it?
yeah.
Oh, you now you were linking to this is I'm just absorbing my own observation here as that's a very, very interesting way, and most likely from what you just said before about ego and greed and control, it might get the attention for those men who are driven by ego, control, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And
It will
and
be
the goal is not,
difficult for women who are driven for that to ask for that type of help. I have
right.
to admit as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
But I mean,
Yeah,
but let's just say, we want to build a house or we want to build a conference center.
yeah.
And, we have a whole bunch of people. And let's just assume we've got some control freaks, men and women, who are
Hmm.
really real control freaks. I would say, fantastic, you guys, you're control freaks. I'd like you to use that control freakness, because control means that you pay attention to detail. Freakness means that you want to get something done. So the idea is, bring those male and female control freaks together and say, you know what, build a conference center, build the house. But could you please make sure that you tick these things off my list as well while you're freaking out about it?
Uh-huh.
And I
Uh-huh.
think, yeah, they'll fight, they'll disagree, but they'll build that center and they'll be so proud of it that they did it together. And you and I will go, oh, as long as our list is done, well, it's accomplished. But
Hmm.
they would have learned an important lesson. But I'm also very, very strong about this idea, and that is, you can't convince every single person on the planet to accept this kind of conversation because they're not evolved enough.
Hmm.
So to expect that would be, I think, have to live for another 1,000,000 years, simply because we're all on a journey together, and some of us are more advanced on this journey than others. And you think of any global problem that we face today, 70% or more of the population think that the problem is actually okay. It's okay that we have global warming. It's okay that we have refugee camps. It's okay that we have poverty. So I can't convince them that it's not okay. So I focus on the 30% who are able to go, let's work together. Let's make this happen. And eventually some of that 70% will come across.
Yeah.
But I think the more we focus on what we were, the more trouble we get into in the gender space. In other words, the more we focus on why would you think that? As opposed to moving into the current or the future state, which is, how can we do this? So you get around the brain's own barriers that it has towards gender. And I think that is the key to No More Boxes, is tricking the brain into accepting, yes, I'm in a box, but how can I, just for a moment, just with my moment with Rúna, jump out of it?
And see that it's that the world isn't flat, it's actually round. That's what you see when you jump out of that box.
Yeah. And we've got lots of examples of people who are not ready to accept a whole lot of things out there. I probably have those kinds of filters and barriers myself, but I hope that I'm amongst the percentage of people that says, show me, teach me, help me, so that I embrace something that I don't know. And, as opposed to fearing what it is you're challenging me to accept. So I think the whole notion of feminine leadership is great and probably is good for some percentage of the population. But my challenge to those who believe in feminine leadership is to say, I hope you're bringing all those people along on the journey and doing it fast, because we're running out of time to do things together. And I hope that I say to all the men out there who do want more women on boards, who do want more women in leadership, that they also will go, it's not about women, but it's about us working together to accelerate the timeline, because we really are running out of time to make the big changes that we need to make. So I like the fact that working together is better than working against each other and not addressing the issue just because I want to be right.
Yeah. It's and there are people who are aligned with this and do want to do this. And my thought as I'm listening to you, David, I'm thinking to all of those people out there who want to make a difference, who want to do this in a collaborative way and want to explore ways that we can make this world a better place, to step out and step up and raise their hand and say, hey, how can I join? Give my resources, whatever they are. And continue this conversation so that people can be free and liberate themselves from something that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, and the other side of the coin is, they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That is such a very old metaphor, because all our life we've been taught focus on people who make the biggest noise or create the biggest problem. What about all those who are doing really well?
Yeah.
We don't focus on them because they're not giving us any problems.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about let's work with those who are able to learn, who are ready to learn,
Mm-hmm.
who are willing to be challenged, and who are saying, yeah, I see what you're saying, Rúna. I see where we need to go. But I don't think we need to worry about those who are not ready yet, because eventually they will get it. And you will know this with technology, for example. There are lots of people who don't embrace new technology, but eventually they will come on board because they have to. They're not they can't help it. But on the other side of all of this, to me, what's exciting is there are those who want to come on board, but they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So I would say to them, let's start small. Let's get you to challenge somebody else about this. You don't have to do 10 or 100 people, just do one. Just challenge them. Get them to come and join us. Get them to jump out of their box of male, female, feminism, feminist thinking, and give them a task to do so that they actually go, yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah,
I can do that.
Yeah.
And to build on that, you know what I mean? The next thing is, wow, you two now see what we see. Now you two go and tell 2 others each. So we now have got a different way forward, as opposed to we're still thinking, gosh, we have to change the world.
It's one step at a time.
Yeah.
It's not about being impossible. It's about being I am possible.
Yeah, and it starts with me. It starts with I, and I am. Yeah. One of the interesting things about this whole topic for me is how the brain is so clever for both species, male and female, in getting us to kind of disagree with each other about gender, and therefore prevents us from being progressive. It keeps us stuck. You know, we don't solve anything, but we had a good fight.
Yeah.
And that's what the brain is about, is not to allow you to solve anything, but just have a really good fight. And in the end, we'll just say, let's agree to disagree, we walk away. But we haven't solved anything.
No. The beauty of humankind. I could talk to you about this topic forever, David. You can see our time is up. One last question. In your wildest dream, David, what would you like to see different in the world 5 years from now, when everything is possible?
In terms of gender?
Gender, yeah.
Yeah. If I was living in that world and everything were possible, I would like men and women to use the unique perspectives. I don't want to say different, it's the unique perspectives. To kind of bring them together so that we could address the challenges that we're facing at the organizational level, then at the community level, and at the country and global level. So to give you an example of that, if we both were competing against each other, we would toss a coin. You would call heads, I would call tails. And let's just say we've got an hour to solve a problem, and only one of us can lead. Would you spend and whoever gets the most number of heads or tails then becomes the leader? Would you? So those are the parameters. Okay. So you've got a coin. Whoever has the most number of heads or tails gets to lead to solve the problem. and you've got an hour to solve this problem. Would you spend the hour tossing the coin? Or would you spend the hour going, forget the coin, let's go and spend it and find out how we can actually solve the problem?
Uh-huh.
Let's go and pay somebody to come and help us join us. So in other words, we have to think differently to solve our problems. The second thing I would love is that in any situation, the male and the human brain experiences or feels differently. So sometimes there is incredible compassion from one side, and it doesn't matter which side, male or female. And the other side, it's like we just say, well, that's life. Life sucks. Life's, whatever. I would love to see us work together and say, you know what? Life has given us a sad situation. But let's work together to lift each other up, or let's make this a better space for us to be in. So that's organizational culture.
Yeah.
How do we build a better culture in our organization? And I think the last thing I would say is, how can we together build a space, and not a box, but build a space where the best of you and the best of me come together to play. So we can laugh, we can create, we can innovate, but how can we play in such a way that you get joy, I get joy, and we manifest or create or bring into being something amazing because we've come from the highest and the best of who we are.
Yeah.
And those are my three scenarios if we could play in that space.
That would be a magical space. I so agree with you. Thank you, David, so much for being our guest. This has been such a pleasure. And to our guests, you will see every information about David on our show notes. And do hope that you have gotten a new idea into how you can become the change that you want to see in your world. Thank you so much.
Was this podcast of value for you? I sure hope so. If so, feel free to share the love and give us your generous review on iTunes or Stitcher. And remember that you can always go to runamagnus.com to find out more about the Changemakers and how we can help you drive the change you want to see in your world.